So it's no secret that I love Bloodborne. I love Bloodborne PvP, in no small part due to the transformation attacks. It's one of the coolest things Bloodborne improved on in the Dark Souls series. The idea that your weapon could switch back and forth between two different weapons using attacks and special moves that would give you bonuses like extra damage, extra stagger, extra hyper armor, etc., etc. It made playing with each weapon feel like they really put a lot of thought into how that weapon would operate. As opposed to Dark Souls 3, where, let's face it, it just feels like they took everything from Dark Souls 1 and some stuff from Dark Souls 2, and they just put it in the game. And then they slapped 4 or 5 different weapon arts across 30 different weapons, and we were supposed to be like, wow, look at this variety. So, my favorite weapons in Bloodborne are the Holy Moonlight Sword, Ludwig's Holy Blade. I love all these weapons, just to tell you the truth. But man, the Holy Moonlight Sword and Ludwig's Holy Blade, the transformation attacks on those are just so great. They've got hyper armor, they true combo, they really look cool as hell. And not only do they look cool as hell, they're functional. They make sense. They actually help you. It's smart to use those attacks. You don't have to, you're not doing them just to be flashy, just for flashy's sake. It's actually, you know, methodical, tactical to use these attacks, which is just fantastic. I love all the weapons, but honestly, those two are probably my favorite, just because I like straight swords and great swords and ultra great swords so much. Now that's not to discount any of the other weapons in the game. You just saw me using the Beast Cutter. You've seen me use the Safe, the Kirk Hammer. I love all these weapons. But the transformation attacks, that's what makes these weapons feel awesome. It's what makes them feel special. It's not just that the weapon can do two things. It's that the weapon can transition between two things. And the transition is actually good. It's not just some, oh look, it looks cool. Like, you know, yeah, it looks cool. It looks fucking awesome. But not only does it look cool, it has a purpose. There's a function to it. As a result, you don't have all these perfunctory buttons like you do in Dark Souls PvP, where L1 is essentially useless. Healing in Bloodborne has its own button. The two-handed stuff, it switches back and forth. Now, some of you guys might have already seen my character. That's sort of an homage to the aesthetic of Bloodborne, where he uses the crow quills, and the crossbow, and the whip, and I switch back and forth between all these weapons, and, you know, I'm wearing, like, hunter-esque clothes or whatever. And that's fun, and that's more the aesthetic, but as one of my Twitch viewers pointed out, I wanted something that was a little more mechanically Bloodborne. Now, you can't really do it, okay? This is a stretch. This is a stretch. I did a stream with this character, and the majority of people, I think, watching the stream had no idea how this guy was Bloodborne inspired. They just didn't get it. Not only that, but it took me like 2 or 3 days of playing to try and figure out how you could tie all this together. But essentially, what we've done is, we've got the Lothric Knight Straight Sword, we've got the Holy Moonlight, the Moonlight Great Sword, and then we've got Astora's Great Sword, and they're both crystal infused, the Straight Sword and the Ultra Great Sword. The Moonlight Great Sword cannot be infused, it automatically does magic damage, right? So, then I've added Farron Flash Sword and Farron Flash Sword and Soul Great Sword to my spell slots. I've got those 2 spells attuned. And what this does is it allows me to have, like, crazy mix-ups, which is pretty fun. And reminds me of Bloodborne. In Bloodborne, even if you throw out an attack and it misses, if you know what your opponent is doing, that missed attack can immediately become a bait, and you can go for something else. So what I tried to do, and you're watching like the growing pains of this build, what I tried to do is use the Straight Sword with Soul Great Sword, and then use the Great Sword or the Ultra Great Sword with Farron Flash Sword. That way I immediately have two different move sets that I can swap back and forth between using L1 and R1. Sort of mechanically like Bloodborne. Now, of course, you can't actually transform your weapon from one to the other, but you can use the spells as a sort of buffer in between swapping back and forth. Now, you can see me using the one-handed greatsword here, and this is the problem with one-handed greatswords. They have no hyper armor. I was complaining about this during a stream, and someone said, well, if greatswords had hyper armor one-handed, then they'd be better than straight swords. Oh no! Oh god! What if something was better than straight swords in Dark Souls 3? Oh no! Whatever. So, I've got these two spells to sort of bounce back and forth between weapons. Now, it was during a Revion stream I played with this, and during one of my streams I played with this, and then I played with it today to record footage for the actual video. But you can see it's fantastic at mix-ups. By the time your opponent realizes what you're doing, you can already have swapped and be going to something else. So there you saw me going Straight Sword, Fair and Flash Sword, Soul Greatsword, Moonlight Greatsword, Astora's Greatsword. And it's awesome. The mix-up potential is so real, it's great. The only thing really holding this back is one-handed hyper armor on greatswords. It doesn't exist. In Bloodborne, it does, and it's awesome. So eventually I figured out, okay, I'm just gonna have to use the two-handed greatsword moveset against straight sword R1 spammers. And I mean, it works because you have hyper armor. The build I'm using, I think I've got like 30 poise or somewhere around that, just enough to get through a straight sword, you know, with a greatsword. Now I still want to be able to swap back and forth between the spells and the weapon really fast, and this is a lot of fun. This is fun. It's not great, it's not a perfect sort of, you know, hey, look, it's Bloodborne. It's not. It's totally different, but it's fun, and it sort of gets that same point across of doing different stuff. L1 matters all of a sudden. L1's important because it's a spell. You've got a straight sword, and then you've got Soul Greatsword. You can see my weapons don't do, or I'm sorry, my spells don't do a lot of damage. This is at soul level 90. I'll show the build off here in a little bit. I'm using the lock shield. I mean the Sacred Blossom shield. No, it's the lock shield. Just pretend. So, I'll show the build off. There's actually two different ring setups you can use for this. The one I went towards originally, I didn't use either of the spell boosting rings. I could have put one on my version, on my ring setup. I could have gone with one, but I just didn't see a point when I could have the Hornet ring, or, you know, a ring I could swap. Estus ring, Chloranthy, Silvercat obscuring. It was, I chose to do that. As a result, you'll see Fair and Flash Sword does just absolutely pitiful damage. But it is a straight sword, and it does chip through shields, and it is a nice mix-up. As far as true combos go, it does seem to true combo with some stuff, but it's very picky about what it true combos with. I've had some issues with the Dark Souls 3 servers the past few days. As you can see, lag has been an issue. And I know it's not my end, because my internet is good. I've got an Ethernet cable hooked up to good internet. And I know it's not some of the people I'm playing against, because some of the people I play in this video I've played before, and anyway, I've just been having issues with Dark Souls 3 servers. They've just been kind of crappy the past few days. Very, very picky. But there you see, straight sword into Soul Greatsword roll catch. You've got the straight sword moveset available to you, and then you've got the big timing mix-up and the range of the Soul Greatsword. And then I've got the Astora's Greatsword, so since I've got Astora's Greatsword, I'll swap over, and I'll use Fair and Flash Sword to go with Astora's Greatsword, because I've got poise in my right hand, so why not have a fast weapon in my left? You could do this with weapons only if you wanted to, but I thought spells was kind of a neat little trick. Plus, it's my intelligence build. I'm using the Moonlight Greatsword anyway. Might as well have some spells on there, right? But yeah, this was a lot of fun, and it's something different, especially for me, because I don't use a lot of spells. But soul level 90, I have a lot of luck getting summoned as a Spear of the Church, and for whatever reason, at soul level 90, for the most part, anybody who's Spear of the Churching is a solo host, which is rough. If you haven't killed that first painting guardian, by the time I show up, there's pretty much no way you're going to win. Unless you just play like super passive. But check out these mix-ups and these combos here. Soul Greatsword appears to true combo into an R1 from a straight sword, but not the second. That makes sense. So that does appear to be a true combo if you're up close. But again, latency is going to, you know, change all of that. This fight is another one where just all the lag in the damn world. But swapping back and forth between those two, you know, I hesitate to call them weapons, but Soul Greatsword is essentially, you know, a weapon. It's essentially an Ultra Greatsword as far as its range goes. It just doesn't have the damage. And the Fair and Flash Sword also doesn't have any damn damage. We're talking about sub 100 damage here. Look at that lag. What the hell is that? And it's not over. But I really enjoyed the bouncing back and forth between different stuff. And like I said, using spells is something a little different for me. I'm not... Spells typically bore the shit out of me, especially like the projectile spells. Why that wasn't a backstab, I don't know. But it's about to get even stranger. Makes sense. Makes sense. Does not make sense. But this was during the first day of me playing around with this build and trying to figure out what would be good, what works, what doesn't work. I wasn't so much interested in... I wanted to test everything, like what comboed, what didn't combo. Here's something that I learned. The Fair and Flash Sword has a running attack. It also has a rolling attack and a backstep attack, if you're interested in that. One of my viewers pointed that out to me, and that was pretty cool. So that exists. Soul Greatsword doesn't have anything like that. Obviously, it's a stationary, whatever, spell. But it's still nice because it's really cool to catch people who try and back away to heal from you, and people who try and roll out of 2R1s from a straight sword. And since it appears to combo with, you know, the straight sword R1, it does work pretty well. Now, in the second iteration of this, with the ring setup, I opted to remove Havel's ring, and I got rid of the Astor's Greatsword, and I'm only using the straight sword and the Moonlight Greatsword. And then I replaced the Havel's ring with the spell boosting rings. I'll show all that off later, though. For right now, I just wanted to kind of go over the growing pains of this build. Look at the damage. It's absolutely pitiful. But the Moonlight Greatsword does damage, and the mix-ups. And there again, you see the first hit on Fair and Flash Sword doesn't appear to have hardly any hit stun on it. Like, so little hit stun that a follow-up Fair and Flash Sword won't hit. But the second Fair and Flash Sword cast apparently has enough hit stun that it true combos with a Greatsword, maybe? I don't know. This will require further testing, and probably, I mean, if you can do like frame data on PC, it would be better, but I'm just calls them like I sees them on the PS4, man. You know what I mean? That's my name. I'm calls them like I sees them on PS4, man. I'm like a superhero, except terrible at everything. Marvadata trope here. Ganker of the Archives. Now, I know Marvado's connection isn't that bad. It's never that bad. Me and Marvado typically have a really good connection. And the other person in this invasion, and I can't remember who it is, I think that's Nino. Yeah, I think that's Nino. Said after the fight, they were like, was that laggy for you? And I was like, yes, it was absolutely laggy for me. I don't know what's going on, but on this particular day, the servers were just so bad. Dark Souls 3. That's a great reason to keep Astor's Greatsword on you. That fully charged R2, it just absolutely shuts down anime, and that's hilarious. Now, one thing that kind of gets shit on with the one-handed greatsword moveset, people don't really take into consideration how good it is at roll catching. It's almost as good as a straight sword. It's pretty fast, in my opinion. I love the one-handed greatsword. I just wish it had like some hyper armor on it. It's just ridiculous. Give me some hyper armor. Bloodborne, the Claymore version of the Holy Moonlight Sword, it had hyper armor, and it was awesome. I'm gonna keep bitching about that. There you can see, no true combo with Fair and Flash Sword. That was dumb. I should have tried, and I should have hit him, I should have punished him with the straight sword, and then used the Soul Greatsword as a follow-up. It was either really good spacing, or he got really lucky. Ultra Greatsword into Soul Greatsword. Nice roll catch. Soul Greatsword is awesome if people want to roll around you. And Panic Toast, after you've killed their phantoms, that's like their specialty, just rolling around you. And Soul Greatsword is like a really nice mix-up. But the whole build is just mix-ups. The whole thing is just mix-ups. It's, hey, it's an Ultra Greatsword. Hey, it's Fair and Flash Sword. Are you used to that now? Are you accustomed to that? Well, then guess what? I'm going to switch it. And I'm going to use Fair and Flash Sword, and I'm going to switch to, you know, a straight sword. Or I'm going to switch to the Holy Moonlight Sword. And I'm going to try and constantly keep you guessing with what's going on. But having that, I mean, this is nothing new. An Ultra Greatsword in one hand and a straight sword in the other. But I think what's different, what I've added to it, is the fact that you have two different movesets constantly, and you're constantly rotating out movesets. So you go from straight sword moveset to Ultra Greatsword moveset to Greatsword moveset, and on top of all those movesets, there's another moveset sitting in your left hand. And that is, in essence, how I would explain Bloodborne combat, for those of you who have never played it. You constantly have two movesets that you can be swapping back and forth between. Now you can tell, I'm still trying to figure out how all this works. Not playing my best. And that's another thing. I'm not saying this is good. I'm just saying it's fun. So, it actually might fare better in the arena because you only have one opponent to worry about instead of like swapping back and forth. But typically for me, the fun starts, and I mean like the mix-ups start after I've killed the phantoms. So you're playing mostly, you know, like you typically would against multiple people, and then you throw in the mix-ups after, you know what I mean, when you're 1v1, you can throw in all these mix-ups, which is why I say this might do well as, you know, it might do pretty well in the arena, I don't know. But I'm not super interested in that, obviously. So I tried to figure out ways to make it work in Invasions, and you'll see. This is another day. This is a different day. Check this out. The running attack seems to true combo into an R1 from a greatsword. Weird stun lock durations on Fair and Flash Sword. It's weird. I just love that because it induces this panic. What do you do? Do you play the straight sword? Do you fight against the straight sword, or do you fight against the spells? You know what I mean? It's like people don't, you know, this guy's gonna roll the straight sword, but now it's an ultra great sword, and it's gonna true combo into the straight sword. It's just nasty. It's just nasty, but it's a lot of fun too. Once you get the hang of it, you know, you can win Invasions with it. And I tried to get to the point where I could use the mix-ups against multiple people. And that just comes with practice. That just comes with practice. Now, my opponent here is like Tryhard McGee in the Lapse armor with the straight sword and the Llewellyn shield. This is the like Fextra Life PvP build. I don't know if it is or not. I'm just gonna pretend like it is. Now, behold, behold, glorious one-handed poise on great swords. You can't make me stop swinging this great sword. It's beautiful, isn't it? Spear of the Church. You get passive poise if there's more than one phantom in the world with the host. As a result, you're basically playing Dark Souls 1 PvP, and everybody else is playing Dark Souls 3 PvP. It's actually a very, very excellent balancing mechanic. And you could say, well, Saint, why didn't they just do that for all invasions? And if you've summoned so many phantoms, then the invader gets poise. Because twinks would be nigh unstoppable. And the reason you get extra stuff here is because there's nowhere for you to go. There's nowhere for you to run. There's no level for you to really use to your advantage outside of 6 pillars and 2 painting guardians who can heal you twice. So instead of being able to heal yourself with Estus, and instead of having a level to run around and play with, what they did was they gave you extra defenses and they gave you passive poise. Now, if they want to do that in the next... If Shadows Die Twice has a mechanic like that, where instead of the invader heals themselves, they have something that heals them, a couple of times, and they get passive poise, then sure, balance like that. This is a fine, it's a well-balanced system for what it is, but it's not the same as Invasions, so don't get it twisted. That's all I'm saying. But one-handed greatsword poise hype, oh my god, it's beautiful. Now, my opponent here is a fishy little person, the Phantom, and that was the one that really had me concerned. So, I was using the straight sword and soul greatsword to basically just keep the host busy and away from me, and then I used the straight sword to deal with the fishy Phantom, because the fishy Phantom I thought was more dangerous than the host. But you can see this is such a fun build to use as a Spear of the Church. I had like a blast. I was trying to poise backstab this guy. If I had done it, I would have like clipped that and I would have just made it its own video. Poise backstabs in Dark Souls 3. I'm sure it can be done. I would guarantee it can be done. But anyway, so the Astora's Greatsword sort of became the perfunctory weapon on this. Now, so the Ludwig's Holy Blade in Bloodborne is a straight sword that turns into an ultra great sword. And the Holy Moonlight Sword is a great sword that turns into a two-handed great sword, which is like, it's almost ultra great swordish. Since I started incorporating the two-handed Moonlight Greatsword, I keep getting my games mixed up. Since I started incorporating that into the build, I sort of got away from using Astora's Greatsword, even though it's an awesome poise weapon, and it really does well on this build. And its numbers really... It's got perfect numbers. Like, when you guys see the numbers on these stats, you're going to think, oh wow, that does work really well together. But still, I found myself not using the Astora's Greatsword a whole lot, especially against solo hosts. I might use it for like a turn and burn against like, a party of like 2 or 3 people, but I wasn't using it as often against solo hosts, mainly because people who use ultra great swords in PvE are typically poised up, and I'm not that poised up. So it's a losing trade for me if I trade with an ultra great sword with an ultra great sword. You know what I mean? So here's the stats. Keep in mind I'm wearing the Prisoner's Chain and the Ring of Favor, but I've got 40 Intelligence, I've got 16 Strength, and 18 Dexterity. 18 Dexterity allows me to use the Astora's Greatsword and the Lothric Knight Sword. And then the 16 Strength allows me to use the Astora's Greatsword and the Moonlight Greatsword. So there's this really, really nice synergy there. Okay, Saint, you're using a shitty catalyst. Why are you using a shitty catalyst? Because it increases my spell casting speed. So instead of having 40 dex or having to have 40 dex, I can cast like I've got 40 dex. So I'm swapping between all these rings. Now there you see the bellowing Dragon Crest ring, and I'm sort of hanging out where you get the bellowing Dragon Crest ring, which increases your spell damage, right? So this is sort of my earliest version of the build, where I'm using the Moonlight Greatsword, Lothric Knightsword, and the Astora's Greatsword. And the spells are just sort of there to do what damage they do, and just basically offer a secondary moveset for me. After this invasion, I'll show you what it looks like when I put on the spellcasting rings, both of them, and I give up the Astora's Greatsword and the Havel's Ring for the Young Dragon Ring and the Bellowing Dragon Crest Ring. So right off the bat, you can just see how important it is to have hyper armor on any build in invasions, because so many people just spam R1 at you. But here we go, straight sword with Soul Greatsword, offering me two very different movesets, serious damage with the straight sword, and then, you know, kind of measly damage with the Soul Greatsword. But it offers me a secondary moveset, and it gives me something else to do. Now, the Astora's Greatsword I'm using to like punish people who chug Estus in my face. It's another poise weapon. It gets really good scaling. Also, for a lot of the first part of the video, all my weapons were +8. All of them. This character was soul level 90 with +8 weapons, because I was testing out like how often I get matches at soul level 90 +8 versus soul level 90 +10. Since this video, I've gone ahead and increased all those weapons to +10, so now he's soul level 90 +10. But a lot of the reason you're seeing like subpar damage is because these weapons were +8 instead of +10. Now they're +10. So there you see 50 damage on the Flash Sword, 57. When I was recording this footage, I was trying really hard to use Fair and Flash Sword so that you could see like the damage on it, and the Soul Greatsword, so you could see the damage and the numbers. Not great. Now I've replaced Astora's Greatsword and the Havel's Ring with the Young Ring, and the Young Dragon Ring, and the Bellowing Dragon Crest Ring. So that means no Astora's Greatsword. I only have the Straight Sword and the Greatsword. True to my point earlier, I tried to learn how to deal with, you know, 2 and 3v1s, rocking this with the mix-ups. Spoiler alert, this host just gets away from me. I have no idea where he ended up going. I tried looking for him on 2 occasions. Here you're going to see me turn around and I see him. He's lagging. That's the last I see of the host. I try and figure out which way he's going. I have no idea where he went. After towards the end of this invasion, I went looking for him. He just died. But yeah. Anyway, back to the Phantom. Using this build to sort of occupy people, keep them busy, and you can use it against multiple opponents, but you're going to be relying more on that two-handed greatsword moveset, because you're going to need the poise against, you know, the really common weapons that you see: straight swords, cell swords, curved swords, that kind of thing. It's my lock shield. There's shields in Bloodborne. Don't knock me for it. So here you'll actually get a chance to like really look at the spell damage. 200, almost 250 damage on Soul Greatsword if you're wearing both the rings. That opponent here was pretty laggy. I fought them twice, and again, it might not even be their fault that they're laggy. This Dark Souls 3 has just been acting stupid. And then you see over 100 damage as opposed to the 50 we were doing earlier. Over 100 damage on the Fair and Flash Sword. So the damage is increased. It is a lot better if you want to run both rings. But this was a fun build. If you've wanted to mess around with something like this, where you throw off your opponent's timings and you have all these like crazy mix-ups that you can use using all these different spells and stuff, I would play around with this. It's pretty fun. This is at Soul Level 90. The build's in the video. But thank you guys for watching. Much appreciated. I'll see you next time. Later, y'all. Saint, why come you didn't use Old Moonlight instead of Soul Greatsword, Saint? Why? Because it does less damage. Now, anyone who asks that question in the comments, now you know they didn't get to the end of the video. Hashtag yogurt, bitch. That should be the reply to anyone who asks why I didn't use Old Moonlight.